Last spring, I had the chance to visit the Marsh-Billings-Rockefeller National Historic Park in Vermont, in the traditional and unsurrendered homeland of the Abenaki people. Has anyone been there? Anyone been to that park? Got one. Oh, two, yeah. Before the arrival of European immigrants, roughly 95% of Vermont was covered in trees, including maples, beech, pine, and hemlock. By the late 1800s, as much as 80% of the forested land had been cleared for farming. But wool from sheep grazing on those stripped hills did not sell. And erosion and flooding from the lack of trees and ground cover made all kinds of farming difficult. Many folks abandoned their farms altogether, leaving broken and empty land behind. But thankfully, all was not lost. Some folks noticed the problem and had the means to do something about it. One of them was George Perkins Marsh, he's on the upper left, who grew up in Woodstock. Over the course of his life, he watched the landscape that he loved change, and he urged the public to reckon with the environmental harm the human industry was causing. Through his efforts, Marsh helped to found the modern American conservation movement. This cause was then taken up by Frederick Billings, he's the one with the beard, who bought the Marsh family land and began cultivating trees for sustainable forestry. The project then passed to 3 generations of women, Julia Billings and her 3 daughters, Laura, Mary, and Elizabeth, who are pictured together, and then to Mary's daughter, another Mary. These 5 women maintained and improved the natural health of the land that they inherited. And then in 1992, Mary French Rockefeller and her husband donated the land to the National Park Service. If you visit the park today, you will find eastern white pine, Scotch pine, European larch, and Norway spruce. There are barred owls, broad-winged hawks, hermit thrush, wood ducks, magnolia warblers, pileated woodpeckers, bobolinks, ovenbirds, and ruffled grouse. There are spring peepers and bullfrogs, spotted salamanders, and red-spotted newts. There are painted turtles and milk snakes. There are woodchucks and white-tailed deer, eastern small-footed bats and porcupines, fishers, and foxes. There are luna moths, dragonflies, and eastern tiger swallowtail butterflies. All of this because a few people worked to reverse the damage of earlier generations. This morning we received the wisdom of Psalm 104, which tells us that creation is a gift from God. God has made the natural world in its wonderful diversity of landscapes and plant and animal life. The psalmist comments on some of the wonders that they must have known from their own native terrain. So if you read the whole of Psalm 104, you will hear of mountains and hills and valleys, wild asses and birds of the air, grasses and cattle, cedars, storks, wild goats, conies, and lions, animals of the forest and creatures of the sea. I wonder if you could take a moment to think of the natural places that you have learned to love, and the plants and animals and landforms that make them so beautiful. What do you think of? What natural places have been special to you? Maybe someplace you just visited once, or maybe someplace that you go all the time. You think of anywhere? The Rifle Range, terrible title. Lovely space, really close by. Yeah, the Rifle Range. The beach, yep. Yes, Lake Waban. Oh, Walden, you said Walden Pond. Mm-hmm. Great Meadows? Sorry, what? Mount Misery? Red Acre Woodlands?
Shores of the Great Lakes.
The Great Lake, oh yes. I grew up a couple blocks from Lake Michigan. Yep. The marginal way in Maine, yeah. Uh-huh. Florida? Yes. Yeah. The Grand Canyon. Amazing. Puerto Rico. What did you say? Imea Falls. David? Yeah, mountains and ocean. Yeah. Tasmania. Oh my gosh, you people have been such interesting places. Susan? Susan. Oh, yes. Sarah's second home on Nantucket. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yellowstone.
Ayers Rock in Australia.
Oh. Big Sur. We're getting all over the country. Yep. Alaska. And your backyard. Utah. Yeah. Rodney. Iguazu Falls. What country is that in? Argentina. Okay, so there are more. It's great. I'm glad that I've got you thinking about all of this. So all of these things that we treasure around us, the psalmist tells us, find their source in God. And not only that, God continues to be present in the natural world in an ongoing way. God is working to order the elements so that the waters might fuel the trees. God works to connect the species and the habitats in mutually beneficial ways so the trees might house the birds and the grasses might grow for the cattle. All life, the psalmist writes, is animated by divine breath, which comes again and again to renew the earth. So you could say that God is a conservationist. And human beings, as a very small part of this marvelous holy creation, we have a special role to play in this work of God. Later in the service, young people's music will remind us that we are made in the image of God, the Imago Dei. And that means we are made to do some of the kinds of things that God does. It is also our work to create and to sustain, to plant and to water, to tend and to care, to renew creation. And sometimes we do it. If you need proof, if you need a reminder, you can visit the Marsh Billings Rockefeller Park and observe the amazing wild life that is there, or you can travel throughout Vermont and notice that 80% is once again forested land. Or perhaps you know about a less visible example much closer to home. Right here at West Concord Union Church, we went from producing the equivalent of 144,000 pounds of CO2 per year to heat this meeting house. And we went from that number to zero thanks to the conviction and effort and generosity of people in this room. David Sedlak told us at the beginning, if we do this well, you won't be able to tell it ever happened, which is true. So I'm figuring out if we need a sign or something to remind us of what's possible, right, if we work together. This week, we're going to be sending out letters to invite folks near and far to participate in supporting this church financially in the coming year. We're inviting you to invest in this church where we are at the work of studying how to be stewards of ourselves and of one another, stewards of community, and stewards of creation. Watch your mail and your email and consider if you might choose to support what we are doing together in God's name. All around us, voices in politics and in culture tell us to take whatever we can, to dominate those with less power than us, and even to have disgust for one another and the world around us. But that is not who we were made to be. We were made for reverence and service to the lands and the lives that surround us. sometimes all it takes is a few people to turn the tide and help us move towards an entirely different future. Please pray with me. God, your creation is magnificent. May we treasure these gifts that we have received and find some small part for ourselves in your work of renewal. By giving what we have, sharing what we know, doing what we can, persevering in hope, holding on to vision, casting a vote as a prayer for the world that we want to live in. May we conserve and renew the great beauty and diversity of your creation. Amen.